Okay, welcome everyone. My name's Charlie Gavain. I'm from iFilm and Television, and we're here today to talk about John Peel's record collection, which is a project we've been working on for some time. We have a couple of people in Norwich joining us as well. We've got James and Ian, who I'll do more of an introduction in a minute, but have been very instrumental about what we're doing. Just before we even start, can I just find out if any of you have actually been onto it and actually seen what we've done? Okay, phew. That's fine. Actually, it's quite helpful to know whether any of you have seen what we're trying to do. Okay, so on the panel as well today, we've got Anne Morrison from the BBC. I'm actually going to let everyone do their own introductions in a minute. We've got Clive and Nigel Humberson from In the Nursery, and you'll see the relevance for that shortly. And as I said, we've got Ian Lowry, who deals with the social media side of things, what we're doing, and James Leeds, who designed and built the site that we did as well. So in the first case, we don't want to do too much of a history lesson, but I just want to explain. About a year ago, I came to Sheffield Documentary Festival, having been in touch with Sheila Ravenscroft, who's John Peel's wife. And we worked with John Peel between 2002 and 2004, and did a television series called Going Home, which we took people back to their first houses. And we did that with John, and John narrated the series. He was doing Home Truths around the time. And we took John back to his first house in the Wirral. We had a fantastic weekend of filming, really enjoyed it, and became friends with John over the next few years, the last few years of his life. And we were still working with him up until he died in 2004. And we lost touch with the family. It wasn't sort of something you could just pick up the phone with after that. But like many people in this country, we were very upset, devastated actually by John's death. So jump forward about 7 years, and completely out of the blue, I got a telephone call from Sheila, because she was now involved with a project called the John Peel Arts Centre in Stowmarket. Stowmarket is a small town in Suffolk, close to where John and Sheila live. And Sheila had been asked to actually lend John's name to the Arts Centre. It's a small building. It's in the Corn Exchange in Stowmarket. And as such, they wanted to do some film work, and and Sheila had remembered us, and they sort of said, okay, will we come down and have a chat? So we started talking, and I said, I'd love to do some filming work, and we can help the centre out, because they were raising funds for what they were doing. But ultimately, what I really wanted to do was to get John Peel's, to do something about John Peel's legacy, the fact the family were as well. In fact, actually, what was quite interesting was the fact that the family didn't realise how much people still held John in high affection, and actually how much the media interest there would be in a project around this. I found out that John Peel's record collection still existed. It was still in the house. It was still housed exactly as John had kept it. And apart from the kids sometimes taking the music out and Tom taking it down to Six Music and Sheila trying to get it back off him, it was still very much as it was. So we started dealing with different projects. Have we lost the Google Hangout, by the way? We seem to have lost our connection to Norwich. Okay, well, that will be a bit of an issue in a minute. About December last year, we heard about a project that was actually happening with the Arts Council and the BBC called The Space. Again, we want this to be more of a conversation, to be honest. It's a small enough room, small enough group of people. So is it people aware of the space? Do they know what the space is or anything to do with that? I'll tell you what, I'm going to ask Anne now, who's actually was responsible partly for sort of like even pre-space being set up, to explain a little bit about the space and what it's about.
Sure. So I run the BBC Academy, which is really training and development at the BBC. And knowing that there was a partnership between the Arts Council and the BBC, we started looking to see whether we could do some training with arts bodies, because it was clear that for arts bodies they were going to need to get into...
Sorry, we've just got... James, Ian, are you there? By the way, we're working on Wi-Fi in this room, and so that might be an issue as well. James, can you hear me? James, can you hear me? Okay. Sorry. If we can just take that up, if you carry on. You carry on.
I'll carry on regardless. So we got involved basically in a sort of digital training with the arts bodies, who were kind of waking up to the realisation that they were going to need to go digital, that audiences were going to need to experience arts in a whole different way. And some were really well down this road. So Tate, for example, was already doing a lot online. Others really hadn't started, or were just using them as recordings of performances, or maybe for marketing or something, rather than thinking about the kind of creative possibilities of digital. And so the BBC, having come down quite a long road with the whole sort of digital journey we've been on, thought, well, there might be things that we could, as part of this partnership, pass on, work with them, and so on. So we set up a programme called Building Digital Capacity, which had seminars and masterclasses and so on, working with arts bodies up and down England. And out of that, there was this notion we would have a sort of end-of-term show, we would have like the results of all of this training might result in something. So from that tiny sort of thought mushroomed the space, which is, I've actually got 52 arts bodies have had grants from the Arts Council to either record performances, to create performances specifically for the web, and enabling things such as this great project to happen. And it started on the beginning of May and runs till October. So the idea was it was really around the kind of the Cultural Olympiad, I guess, and 2012 and all that's happening in London, making that accessible to others who couldn't get tickets for things, who were interested, and also to have a kind of a legacy to a lot of the events that are happening this year. So I've been mentoring on the project, a completely different project, which is the 37 Shakespeare plays in 37 different foreign languages, called Globe to Globe down at Shakespeare's Globe on the South Bank. And I've been looking after that one, and they've gradually been uploaded to the site. But actually, out of all the projects that we've got up there, the one which is really driving the traffic so far is this one. It's really interesting. It's got probably the most publicity, I think. It's one that's created most interest, and it's the one that, people keep coming back to. So I think we really didn't know whether that was going to be the case or not. We started this in the nature of a bit of an experiment, not knowing how audiences would respond to different parts of the site. But, this has been such a hit so far.
It looks like we may have lost our Norwich compatriots, so I'm going to have to take you through the site myself, actually. But in the first case, I think, for just explain what happened, was that in December there was expressions of interest actually needed to go into the Arts Council for projects, and we were working with the John Peel Arts Centre because it's the arts organisations that actually have to apply for the funding, and we only really heard about the space or realised the potential to actually apply for funding the night before the deadline, actually, of doing this. So we wrote an application very quickly. It was an expression of interest, so it didn't actually take too much to be able to do so. And we phoned up the Arts Council and said, we're thinking of doing this. Does this sound the sort of thing you're looking for? Because it talked about archive and what we'd be able to do. And what we were trying to think of was, basically, this project runs, as you said, from May the 1st through till the 31st of October. It's 26 weeks. What could we do with a record collection, a physical entity that would actually be of interest? How could people do that? And the reason that John's collection had never really been put online or anything done that, as soon as anyone started thinking about it, they just went, music rights. It's an absolute nightmare. I mean, you've got over 26,000 LPs, you've got over 40,000 singles, you've got God knows how many CDs. And so they just stopped. They didn't actually take it any further. No one actually said. So I started completely the other end and said, well, now let's forget the music rights to start with. What's actually in the collection? Do you think people will be interested in how actually John kept it and the physical sort of looking, the way that he actually catalogued all his, the actual records themselves? So perhaps what I should do now is just ask Paul to actually play an introduction by Sheila, who kind of explained what we set out to do with the space, and then we can continue the story.
John's record collection is one of the most important record collections in the world, and the Space Project is actually allowing people to just have a small insight into what's there.
The best of them, the ones that are regarded as being the best, either big records or those by little feet, still sound terrific, or
I know there's over 26,000 albums. No idea how many singles there are, or CDs. We started cataloguing them and we put them on file cards in about, I would think, 69. They're bog standard little file cards, and John hand typed them on his old Olivetic typewriter. So they're all little file cards, and they are done alphabetically, but the albums are stored numerically, so they cross-reference. Each week, we're choosing the first 100 of each letter of the alphabet and giving some information, what's there, what John particularly starred, what were his favourite tracks, and also within each letter there'll be one artist that we will choose that we will particularly feature, and hopefully people are going to really enjoy having a little bit of John's collection.
So that's how we started. We asked Sheila, much to her annoyance, who's been absolutely fantastic. The family have been really, really good about this, but I think what was really important to us was to make sure that everything about this felt very personal. We've actually been intrusive so much as we've been in the house and being able to sort of like go through the whole record collection itself. So to continue the story, we put the application in, we were shortlisted. There were, I think, over 700 original applications in there. It was whittled down to 100 and something. And then we spent much of January actually putting together and understanding what we might actually do. So what we set out to do was actually, we described it as an online museum that actually you'd go in there and you'd be able to browse through John's record collection, and you'd go into the different rooms. Now, what you're seeing there is actually, if you go to thespace.org, which is the website, and then link through, either through music or sometimes we're on the front page, in fact most weeks we're on the front page, so that you'll arrive at this John studio. And this is a photograph of actually what John's studio is like now. It's actually not dissimilar to how it was when he used to broadcast every Thursday night. He would do quite a lot of live gigs and stuff out of the house, and that would be where he'd be producing them from. And within that, we've highlighted different areas. So you've got video TV. You click in there and they'll link to all the video material that we've been producing as well. We go there, you get to the Peel sessions. You click across, you get some photographs and stuff that we've got, some of the radio shows, and there's a blog you're able to go to as well. And then ultimately, you click down into John's record collection. So if you click into John's record collection, and hopefully this will also work, you come down to the shelves of records that we've done. And what we actually wanted to do, because it was so large and because it was impossible to actually go through the whole collection itself, we wanted to run this, to create this as a pilot and create this to get interest and to get people really excited about what we're doing. So we've taken the first 100 letters, as Sheila explained, from each letter of the alphabet. Now, John, when he actually started the collection, the way that he actually kept his records, because it was so vast, he didn't do it alphabetically, because if you can imagine, every time he got a new A, he'd have to move everything along in the house. They actually had to reinforce the foundations of the house because of the weight of the LPs within the house anyway. So so we've actually had to go through the records themselves and actually physically pull them out of the collection. And when you go to them, at the moment, what will happen is, as each week goes by, you're able to click on the A's, the B's, the C's. And so if I give you an example, if you click onto the A's, and hopefully this will work. It's a shame, because James, who actually designed the whole thing, we've lost him on the Google Hangout, and hopefully this is also going to connect through Wi-Fi. Okay, so what they actually did is they went into the collection, they physically pulled out the first 100 A's, which actually got through. And the reason we knew, again, if you've just seen the collection, is the file cards that John actually kept, what the first 100 A's were. And we'd scanned every single of one of these file cards. We've gone through, pulled out every single record. We've then, within each of the records themselves, if you open that, you then get the front and back covers, and quite often material that's kept within the sleeves as well is available, although we have a section that's able to do that as well. And we've then been producing a featured artist each week, which has been chosen by the families if they actually wanted to, who they actually think they would like a short film made about. And so we did that. It's not always, and we're not always choosing the obvious. When we reached F, everyone said, "Oh, you're going to do the full." Actually, it turned out in the first 100 of the albums, we don't reach full. It actually only gets to Faith No More. So it's quite phenomenal. You actually realise when you get into the Bs, you're talking about several thousand, or something like that. So that you have, we get, but we wanted to find the right sort of artists that we wanted to choose, and it's been again very important that we work very closely with John's family to be able to do this. And much as I tried to nag them to come to Sheffield and actually come on stage, they're very shy, a bit like John was actually, and they didn't want to appear in front of everyone, sort of like talking about it. So that's why we've got Sheila involved in what we're actually doing. So if you'll indulge me a little bit longer, and then I'll stop hogging the sort of like all the limelight, then I'd like to just play you the very first film we actually made as part of it to show you what we do and explain why Mike Absalom was chosen from the A's.
The A's was an obvious one because we just looked and saw it was 0, 0, 0, 1. And it's Mike Absalom.
I was hungry when I left the train. I entered a Chrome cafeteria. I knew it was one of a chain.
So it was just pre-big psychedelia, Sergeant Pepper in '68 and all of that. Ran a folk club in Inverness Place in Bayswater, the Holy Ground. Traditional Irish music. People like the Dubliners used to drop in. And then I was booking people like the Incredible String Band for £8, and everybody on the scene.
Powdered eggs come in cellophane packets, but I must say I lit out the mouth.
Things slowly became more and more fruit flag flying. Moved away from beer and into all the other delights of that summer of love. I was quite stoned a lot of the time, because it was a kind of vague time. I had friends who were a band called Gasworks, and I used to hang out at their flat in West Kensington, and the radio would be on a lot of the time. And they would be talking about John Peel and saying, John Peel played this, and John Peel played that. It was like a musical maypole with everybody swinging around him. He was a kind of the man who put the good music out. I considered my music to be good, and he put me out.
Now listen, a terrible story I'll tell you, will fill you with horror as you lie in your bunk.
It was recorded in Streatham, in my sister's front room, on Bob Hall's tape recorder. He was a boogie pianist. And I made it with Diz Disley. And we basically just sang into this little old tape recorder, and he played along with me. It turned out to be quite good.
I first met my match, Laura Lake was her name.
It was evening. A chill winter's wind.
And so I moved up through the folk clubs, started in the college circuit. We had explosions. And I used to tap dance in a tutu, in black tights, playing the violin and spewing blood capsules out of my mouth. Very hard work. Lots of traveling. Not much sleep. Lots of girls. Lots of long cigarettes. As it was, it seemed quite normal. But of course, when I walked out into the streets in Earl's Court, a little more than stoned, and saw Paisley prints appearing in diamonds coming out of the tongue. It's something you do remember.
Welcome from us to Mike Absalom.
Hector the dog-sniffing hound used to be seen around town with inspectors and pigs. He was fun of the bigs. A bark from that knock sent you down. One night they were casing a joint
On point duty Hector did point at the small herbal fag, then he took a slight ride, saying bow wow. Wow.
I had good big gigs for 10 years after that. I remember sitting in a burger bar in this court, having my burger, and this huge Hell's Angel clanked up to me, kind of jingling spurs and everything. And I thought, oh my God, what's this? There I was sitting with my freak flag and a little hippie, me. And I saw you on television. Great, Hector the dog sniffing now. My first fan. I remember a gig I did with John Peel. I think it was Lewis Technical College or Polytech, about 1973, 74. It was a terrible gig. It was my worst gig ever. So we got there pretty late, pretty worn out. And John Peel was the DJ. I remember him up in his little box over the dance floor. And I did my spot. But my manager had decided that I had to be a kind of new Leo Sayer. That wasn't my style at all. It was a satirist. And he dressed me up in his frilly shirts, and I had amazing makeup on. I think the show was druggy. And he made me stand instead of sit. So I was standing there with my old J200, trying to get through the show. And somebody came out behind me, and I couldn't see the person behind me. And started jumping around and doing silly walks. And I finished the show, and I got very, very angry. In those days, I was young, I got angry. And I tried to kill the guy with a mic stand. I chased him all over the hall and behind the backdrops. And finally, I was about to smash his head. And I'm glad I didn't. All the roadies jumped on me, and the manager and his boyfriend pinned me down, shoved a pipe between my lips, a peace pipe, I suppose. And the next day they took me off and had me initiated into transcendental meditation to kind of try and calm me down, which was a big mistake for the music scene because I got deeper and deeper and deeper into meditation. In the end, I gave up music in England and emigrated to Canada, married a meditation teacher. So it was a seminal gig, that one with John Peel. I've been a painter on the bog in Ireland for the last 10 years. I'm quite successful and writing a lot of poetry. And I've got a book coming out this year called Old Fart, which has a lot of poems about those days. And I'm making a little comeback. I suddenly discovered I have countless fans. And they're always asking for Hector and WBC Stick. So I thought, well, maybe I'll just get my guitar out again and brush up on those.
Now among the butterflies and flies he flies, closing his eyes. Ladybirds and beetles passing him by.
Lazy days, summer waves, skies cornflower blue. Hector defector, frolicking in the dew.
Hector the dog sniffing hound used to be seen around town.
Thank you. It was Mike was just perfect, to be honest. This is the very first one that we found. We didn't realise that he was still around. I mean, it's like you go in there and you start doing some research, and actually chosen by the family, but he never really knew John particularly well, but he kind of embodied a lot of what John did. And he was a great character to actually start what we're actually doing. So really, from every week now, it started on May the 1st, and every Tuesday, we reveal the next 100 albums in each letter of the alphabet. We're up to G at the moment. Our featured artist has been Gallon Drunk. And just to sort of, I suppose, one of the surprising things, although we knew that John was still very popular and there was a lot there, and we had to persuade the family that there was a lot of interest out there. When this launched, I don't know whether it's because a lot of the journalists are actually the right age that they remember John Peel very fondly and everything else, but this just went mad. I mean, there's actually sort of the amount of interest that there ended up in the Wall Street Journal, in the Rolling Stone magazine. It was in all sorts. And it actually was also reported very misreported to start with, because the biggest issue about everything that we're trying to do here is actually, as you'll see, we can't digitize all the music that's actually in the collection because, one, we don't have the time, the resources, and most importantly, we don't actually have the rights to be able to do so either. So, unfortunately, one of the people who's due to be on the panel today, who's through illness of his father-in-law not being able to come along, is someone from Spotify, because that's been the main way that we're actually linking out to the music that's over there, because to actually have done this and then have no way to actually listen to a lot of the music would almost be a crime. But at the same time, we can't clear all the rights and be able to do that. So we've linked through to Spotify. And this has led to a number of sort of, I suppose it's the closest we've had to complaints, certainly people questioning why we've actually decided to do this, why is it on Spotify, why do I have to join Spotify, why do I have to give away my details and everything else. And actually Spotify is not available in every country in the world, and this really has become quite international. We had recent statistics that were just shown that on day one that the site went live, there were 112,000 unique visitors to the site. We had over 10,000 in 1 hour at one stage. Since then, in the first 4.5 weeks, we're up to 250,000 unique users, and over 57,000 of them have come from America, which has been quite surprising because John himself isn't necessarily there, but it just shows how the collection's been sort of like, or at least the music is so much. John was so international in his taste and his flavour and what he actually wanted to do. But that's been, I suppose, the big issue that we're trying to do. About 50 to 70% of the albums, when you actually get to this stage, you can actually, if you can actually link out. Can you do it on the A's? No, the A's has only got Discogs, so actually that's actually taking you through to more information about the album. So that was been one of the issues that we're still trying to address at the moment, and the more that we can get there. Interesting enough, for Mike Absalon, his music wasn't available online, it wasn't actually at all out there. So he gave us the album, and we put it on SoundCloud. So we have actually made that one available, which wasn't available before. So people who want to go and listen to Hector and everything else, they can go and do so now. So that's kind of where we've got to with the project at the moment. Every week we're doing more stuff. I'll go into a little bit detail later on about the social media side of things. And as I said, I'm afraid we've lost our minority compatriots who will be able to give you a lot more detail. But rather than leave the rest of the panel just sitting here while I'm rabbiting away, I really want to introduce Clive and Nigel because although it's not public knowledge yet, they are going to represent the eyes for part of the collection as well in the nursery. So to start with, just explain a little bit about who you guys are and what John Peel actually meant to you when you were setting up. Give us a bit of history about where you came from.
I'm Nigel from the band In the Nursery. We're a Sheffield-based band. We came up to Sheffield in 79-80 to study and started the band in 1981. That was our first concert. And obviously at the time we were like thousands of other people listening to John Peel at night, pressing the cassette recorder to record, snippets of music which you thought would be interesting, which you then go down to a record shop, discover these new artists, go and see them live. It was all the whole way of learning about music at the time. And through that, it inspired us to discover people like Joy Division. I remember hearing Joy Division for the first time on the radio, John Peel, hearing the track Shadow Play. I was learning bass at the time, and it inspired me to carry on playing music. So we started the band influenced by these artists, and we brought out our first record in 1983 with the whole do-it-yourself ethic and the punk ethic. We hand silk screened the cover of the artwork. Clive was at art college at the time, so we hand silk screened it and sent copies off to BBC, as you did. And a few weeks later, we were listening to John Peel and our tracks were played. It was a great sort of acknowledgement of what you did as an artist. And I think Clive wrote him a letter as well. Obviously sent letters with the records that we were sending. And there was one case where we sent a 7-inch single, the follow-up single to the mini album. And we sent the single, and John started playing it, and we were listening to him play it, and it was a really bad pressing of the single. And halfway through, he butt in. He said, "Sorry, chaps, I'm going to have to take this off. The quality's not good enough." And Clive sent him a letter apologising and sent him a new copy, I think. Is that right?
I think he sent the copy, the letter that I'd sent him, and he's just written on the top, this one's got a bad scratch on it. So he just, I think that was our only interaction with him in a way.
But yeah, hopefully that helped. I mean, that raised awareness for the band. We got loads of gigs in London. I don't know if it was a result of that, but it was at the time it was the way to get your music out there. Like we were talking earlier, there was no internet. Getting music onto the radio and people like John Peel was essential. Not essential, but it sort of justified what you're doing. And we've carried on ever since. We're twin brothers. We're in the nursery, still active. We still perform live all over the world. We do film music. We do soundtracks for silent films. And yeah, it's great that we were one of the first 100. I mean, listening to the numbers, we're just like a pin in a haystack, and it's wonderful that we've got chosen as a.
I think in the eyes, you didn't have 2,000 as well, so.
So I'd like to know how did In the Nursery get chosen?
Well, the way that any of the artists are chosen, that it's very much Sheila and William who go through the list that are there, and I think they're trying to do sometimes a little bit different. I mean, something like Mike Absalon. I mean, actually, Mike Absalon stood out because of his number 0001, but we also had. If you go to B, it was Babes in Toyland, and actually that was particularly because the kids were very sort of fond of them, and they worked very closely with them. We had another Sheffield band, Cabaret Voltaire, was for the Seas, and I think it was actually the number of Cabaret Voltaire albums that were actually within there as well. Right. So it's trying to be, I think, a little bit different each time to actually choose them. I think probably, to be honest, it was. Within the nursery, it was actually, as much as anything, that you were one of many bands in terms of that John helped along the way, and it's actually kind of representative of actually hundreds of bands that have actually been sort of help that have been there, and actually the fact that you had, they also, I think, when you recorded the story about sending it in and having to take it off the air as well. We're trying to find that audio, I think, at the moment. I'm not sure whether we've been able to get John's audio. So. We've got a Google Hangout back here. I'm not quite sure whether the guys in Norwich can actually hear us and whether they can join us at all in this. So technology, Wi-Fi and everything. So whoa, you both there. Ian, James, you there?
Yeah. Hello.
All right, good. Okay, well, let's see whether we can do this before you disappear again. So very quickly, I'm just going to I think, James, in your absence, I've whistled through kind of what you designed and built. So I don't know whether it's tempting fate to actually try and ask you to sort of like show us a little bit more detail. But I think probably just to explain the way that I did explain the fact that you'd done a very little small bit of work for us, and then I found out that you were above Dander's shop, and then actually that kind of fate seemed to intervene and sort of said, okay, we need someone to design this. But if you can just talk about why the design is as it is, and what it was that made it so personal, and the way that you've put it together, and also, without going too techie, because I don't know how techie people are here, why it's actually quite difficult what you've done.
Okay. I think the way we were trying to do it, can everybody see okay? Are we up?
You are up. I mean, you're a bit sort of breaking up and stuff, so it may be best. I mean, we'll have actually shown the actual site, so maybe just if you talk about it, and then later on we can go to it and see whether it crashes as a result.
Okay, so the actual site was, we didn't have very long to do it, so we had about a month to get it shot, designed and ready and up. So that gave us a limitation. We had limitations from the BBC in terms of what we could technically do, because they didn't want anything running on the BBC's web servers, because that could potentially introduce a security risk, and we didn't have time to go through all the rigmarole of getting everything checked out. So everything had to run basically on your PC when you saw the site, so that gave us some limitations. But we needed to run it on the BBC servers because it was going to get hit with so much traffic. So we had several technical challenges and a very short period of time. But I had a really clear vision as to how I wanted it to interact with the collection. So we wanted it to be like actually being in the room as far as we could make it. So we went out with a photographer called Dave Guttridge, and as soon as he saw the room and saw how it was, in a way, because John's studio is very much as he left it, pretty much on the day he died. Nothing's really been moved. All of his stuff is still kind of exactly as it was, and it's an amazing space, really. So we thought, okay, well, we can use this very photographically. Now, usually when you approach building a website, you think about how menu structures are arranged and site design and that kind of thing. But we wanted to really do away with all of that and do something very different. Okay, essentially we wanted to make it so that you were running your finger through the spines and you're actually browsing the records as if you were there, rather than just using a website to look for stuff and look through an A to Z and that kind of thing. So we pulled it together. We did some stock frame animation for the sleeves coming out. The great thing is everything you see on the site was actually there. So all of the sleeves are the actual sleeves, all the cards are the actual cards, and all the shelves are actually John's shelves that we've put together and made interactive. And it went down very, very well. There were a few people who preferred a traditional menu structure, if you like, but by and large they're in the minority. And the response from the music community, Rolling Stone magazine, Enemy, people like that were really overwhelmingly positive. And from my point of view, because I'm a bit of a geek, and so is Ian, the tech community really loved it. I don't know if it means anyone to anyone there, but people like Engadget and Gizmodo, who we respect for what we do from a techie point of view, would do it as well. So the combination, I mean, the whole team here is focused on music and tech, and that's what we do, and that's what we love. So for us, this was amazing. Is that a fire alarm?
Well, that's what I thought, but no, I've been told it's not a fire.
1 o'clock siren.
It's a 1 o'clock siren. Sheffield's on fire.
Who has 1 o'clock sirens?
So, okay, well, right, we'll just...
You're all going out to play now, I presume.
Yeah. So, okay, quickly, while we still got you and you still seem to be there. So, Ian, just to talk a little bit. So Ian's role James brought on was really, we needed someone every week to be responsible of what's going on with. There's a Twitter feed at John Peel Archive, which I'd like you all to follow, and sort of. But within that, there's extra material that's going out as well, particularly with a Flickr account where John kept stuff. And he kept it within the record sleeves as well. So, Ian, can you just explain a little bit about what you've been doing and going down to the house, and what's the response you've been getting through Twitter?
Yeah, well, like you said, we're doing quite a lot of stuff through Flickr. Basically, as the records appear on the site, there was only really the kind of album covers, maybe the sort of inner sleeve, which appeared on the site, but looking through the records physically, John's always kind of kept a whole bunch of extra bits and bobs inside the record sleeve. So there's either letters from the bands or sort of ancient kind of press releases and things like that. Just real kind of amazing nuggets of musical history, really. Just some sort of amazing photos and, yeah, just kind of correspondence he's had with the record labels and the bands and things like that.
Just really cool stuff.
Yeah, it just really kind of joins everything together. I mean, there's some, I don't know if we're really allowed to say, but there's some letters from some quite famous people. There's letters from John Lennon and there's Freddie Mercury and David Bowie and things like that. Just kind of sitting inside the records, you know.
We weren't expecting it either.
No.
I mean, John was really super meticulous and quite OCD, I think, actually.
Yeah.
Because, you know, everything's exactly how it should be.
He's a massive hoarder, basically. So I've been taking photos of a lot of those things and kind of putting those out through Flickr and Google+. And the response has been great, really. I mean, especially for the fans of sort of particular bands that are getting to see stuff that they perhaps haven't seen before from the band's career and the band's history. So it's really sort of fascinating insight into John's collection, as well as sort of the general kind of music industry, and also kind of how it works. There's a lot of labels kind of getting in touch and almost kind of sweet-talking John for sessions and things like that. So it's really interesting to see what we've got. But yeah, it's flickr.com/John Peel Archive. There's a lot of stuff to look through, so check it out.
It's really interesting as well on the social side, the actual bands that featured actually getting in touch, and there have been several bands that, because of the archive, have reissued albums. You know, some of the stuff that isn't available in the archive, we've actually had bands come up and record companies come up and reissue stuff as a consequence of it. It's like spring in.
Okay, we've lost them again. This is good. All right, well, I think they actually got through most of what I wanted them to actually talk about. Guys, I don't know whether you're still there. Yeah, you seem to be coming. You're unfortunate you're coming and going, but I think if you can, I mean, really, what I wanted to sort of know.
Okay, well, we'll leave it there.
Right, okay. All right, well, if there are any particularly technical questions, and then I'll come back from Sheffield and ask you.
Wow,
we can follow up that, but thank you very much for coming on there, and you're welcome to sort of
or tweet us.
Hang out. Yeah, well, that's it. You can tweet them, because if you go online now, then we'll crash their Google Hangout. So Google Hangout, great, good on Google. Yeah. Thank you for that. So thanks, guys, very much. All right, so I'll catch up with you when I'm back in Norwich.
Thanks, guys.
All right, cheers. Okay.
Take care.
All right, I think I'll close that down just to make it safer. So oh look, there we go. So I'm going to close that tab for a second. So really, I think that was probably John's, the way that John actually kept a lot of stuff. I think if anyone knew John Peel or knew a lot about John Peel and the way that he was sort of like meticulous in sort of going through the records, it was actually, I think a lot of people were surprised the way that he catalogued them, the LPs, because the LPs are the only things he actually has catalogued, but these cards that he did, I mean, it must have taken, and we know it sort of took forever, that, I mean, there are so many foreign bands within it, and he would actually type out all of the actual artists, sort of like the names of the tracks. I think he did get to one that just sort of said various in Latvian or something like that, to sort of like titles, but overall he sort of did that, and we know that the furthest, I think we've seen a card that goes up to 26,300 and something as well, so that's just within the LPs. And there's just a filing cabinet full of the cards that are there, so it's been great. And then to discover some of the things that they were talking about, the letter that's from John Lennon, the letters from Freddie Mercury, Bowie, and so on, that he did keep a lot of the stuff. And I think even as he was doing it, and we've asked Sheila the question, is that he was aware that he was creating an archive, a collection, which wasn't just for his lifetime, that he was actually there, that he realized that this did have a legacy, that there was a point to it. And that's, I mean, really what we're very interested in sort of like exploring further. I mean, I'm blatantly sort of like pitching a feature documentary about the collection itself, because that's what I think the next stage for us to do. So although the space project that's actually ongoing at the moment, which will run to the end of October, we don't know what's going to happen to next, and I'm not going to put Anne completely on the spot because you won't have a complete answer and stuff. But I think just generally, how is it from the Arts Council, from the BBC's point of view, been going without? What's the gut feeling about this going forward? Because I do recommend that please do go to thespace.org, because there are 53 different projects that will be running on there. That they had the opening film Sheffield here that was actually that was there the other night with the Sea Power Orchestra. So it's a really amazing sort of collection of different arts organisations, and in some ways it's another channel. And you don't get a lot of the commissioning headache you do with commissioning editors sometimes.
Well, I think the thing is we're 6 weeks into a 6-month project, and so there's already an immense amount of material on there, but you're going to see it build up cumulatively over the next few months until the end of October. So the idea was originally it's something of an experiment. It's tied into the Cultural Olympiad and 2012 and so on and so forth. So it had a finite amount of time, and part of what we're going through, I as a BBC mentor, but all the Arts Council and the BBC is going to go through a big evaluation kind of project to look at, well, did it get the reach that we hoped it would? Did it reach enough people? Did it make the impact that we wanted? Was there the kind of learning that we expected to go on, which was very much about transfer of skills to these arts bodies and recipients of the grants in order to mean that they could build their digital knowledge for the future and therefore be able to do something like this in the future again. So all of those were kind of aims of the project, and we have to kind of assess to what extent we've achieved those. But what I would say is that it's gone down incredibly well, and it has got a lot of attention, and so I'm optimistic. You know, I think the Arts Council, talking to them, they're keen to continue it in some way, and they're the major funders. They've put £3.5 million, you know, in grants into this project. The BBC has put in probably, you know, up to 2 million in terms of effort and building the technology around it, and all of the kind of staff effort that's gone into it. So it's, you know, it's been a substantial commitment, but I think it's delivering really well. And so I think there's going to be a moment when we're going to need to decide, does this become a more permanent thing, or does it continue? And you know, I think there's goodwill on both sides to see if we can do that. But as I say, we're kind of near the beginning of it, so it's probably premature to say that anything definitive about it as yet. What I would say is that if people do appreciate it and enjoy it, the best thing that people can do to ensure its continuance is to, you know, like it on Facebook, tweet about it, share it with friends, just make sure that people are aware of it, because the more of that happens, the more likely it is that we're going to think, well, actually, yes, there's value for money here.
I mean, I think the thing that surprised me, actually, well, it was explained to me by technical people that what the space was really about was making sure that it worked on every mobile platform. And that sounds, okay, that's fine. I mean, I'm not a technician in terms of that, but actually when it was explained to me that actually they had to reversion every piece of material they were receiving 16 times. They actually have made a real rod for their own back to actually do it. So the technical team have been overwhelmed by the amount of material they've actually had to produce, but actually to get it to work. And I think that there's, I mean, like anything, there's been some teething problems along the way. But I think for arts organisations, and I mean, we're a production company, so we actually teamed up with an arts company, but I would say that's not a bad idea. I mean, actually, if you're a production producer or anything else like that, find out about, and you think you've got good ideas, or you think you can find ways to work with your local arts organisations, and I think this is an amazing opportunity. It's not, I mean, I don't know whether you could liken it to sort of like when Channel 4 started, when it was a bit like you could do whatever you want. That's not quite the same, but actually the restrictions aren't quite the same. You still have to clear everything, and you have to clear everything sort of like for worldwide use, and there's still some of the usual compliance issues that you actually have to come across. But in terms of, you're allowed to make mistakes, and actually you're encouraged to, which is actually a really sort of liberating kind of experience to be able to go out. So we sort of said, so I'd like to think we didn't make any mistakes, it's all perfect, but along the way we just had to, I mean, for example, sometimes we've had to do some very quick turnaround projects. So we discovered when we started doing this that on May the 23rd was the 40th anniversary of the Ziggy Stardust session. So we were asked, could we actually put together a film for that? So we couldn't get to David Bowie. I don't think David Bowie, even the BBC couldn't get to David Bowie, so they tried as well. But we managed to get to Trevor Boulder, the bass guitarist, and actually make a short film about that, and go back to Maida Vale Studios and sort of do a lot of stuff that was there. So it's been an amazing kind of opportunity, and although in some ways we're making 4 to 7 minute short films all the time. It's a sort of, and a lot of it starts with, you just start with an interview, but it's building all the material around it. It's been a really interesting exercise, and then for us it's sort of saying, okay, but this is a pilot. I mean, the whole space in some ways is a pilot. So that you've got to say what does happen next, and if there isn't an audience, if the people don't go to it, then it probably won't continue. So I suppose that, I mean, can I encourage everyone that's there to sort of like bother, go on it, spread the word. And the same will be very much about sort of keep following what we've been doing, because it is every week. And we do find that come Monday, there's still quite a strong Twitter feed as people start guessing what are the next albums. We thought we could actually run a competition to see who's the most John Peel and who's got the most record collections. But generally it's about, people have about 3 to 5 records within the collection of 100 that are actually there. So it's still a fairly small number overall in what we're trying to do. So,
and I think it is the fact of that sort of, you know, gradual release where, you know, every week there's a bit more going up that's actually keeping it fresh. So I think that will continue. But I think it's a good point you make about there's a real opportunity, I think, for indies, for independent production companies to link up with arts organisations, because in a way we're seeing the emergence of a new market here. I think that you know, with the Arts Council and arts bodies as kind of commissioners of content, rather than just thinking of it in terms of TV channels. And of them also as creators of content, but they don't have currently all the skills to be able to do that. So they need partnerships and they need help to be able to get into this area. I think only 4%, before we started all of this, 4% of arts organisations had done anything digitally. So, there's a way to go, because I think, more and more people agree there's going to be at least a kind of, a big manifestation of the arts in the digital world. So it is an opportunity, I think, for people to link up. On the Globe to Globe project that we did, the Globe worked with an events company to actually capture each performance, on kind of 4 cameras and put it up there. But it evolved completely different, actually, production techniques to do it ultra cheaply, so that we could get it, 37 plays captured without having a multi-million-pound budget on that alone. So I think, innovative methods, I think it's a fantastic place where people can experiment. They can do all sorts of mad things, like trying to represent Twitter traffic through music. The Britain Sinfonia is kind of interpreting 500 Twitter users and the kinds of tweets that they're putting out, and doing that through music. So, that's the kind of thing. I think you'd struggle to get that onto, a normal channel, but somehow in this area you go, yeah, why not? We've got all of this going on. We can afford to take quite a few risks. And it feels to me like this is something that is perfect for this kind of space website, where you've got that interaction and you've got just that wealth of material. But I wanted to ask you what you're going to do with the X's and the Z's, or is that, have you actually got 100 albums for that?
There are 2 letters of the alphabet that don't have 100 in, and that's Q and X.
Okay, there's Z has 100.
Z has over 100.
My goodness.
And the even the Q and the X's, I think we're into the 70s, which is just,
wow.
Just like, where do they come from? So it is quite phenomenal. So actually, I like to say that there's, but we do have a little bit extra that comes in the last week as well. So there's something else that we're doing for the end of this stage of it. But I mean, I suppose if you look at sort of like 2014 will be the 10th anniversary after John died, and ultimately, I think the goal would be to try and get the archive, not necessarily all digitised and everything available, but at least what's in it available there. I mean, I think we could continue with the LPs very quickly, and actually, because the cards are all there, and actually scanning and replicating that is laborious, but it's actually quite a quick job. So I think we can get through quite a lot fairly quickly, but there's a very obvious problem. We need money, and the John Peel Centre needs money to be able to do this. And just talking quickly about the centre, because I mean the John Peel Centre are completely run by volunteers. So we went to them and said, look, this is the idea, this is what we'd like to do, and then they completely embraced it and have got involved with it. And Tom, who's the head of the centre, has been across everything that we're doing, but we've also been able to have the ability to work completely with, the relationship was already there with John's family. So again, as a production company and an arts organisation, we've come together, and actually it works so well, and there is, I think, transfer of skills, but at the same time, we've learnt an awful lot as we've gone along. And I think he'll kill me if I don't actually mention my BBC mentor. He sent a text saying that I've got to say Stephen James Yeoman is fantastic. So I have to be completely honest. He's been fantastic at sort of like helping us. And I think that's the other side of things. So the mentoring within the BBC, and mentoring is as much as sort of like we were talking many times every day to try and get this all sort of like sorted in time, and pushing us. And when we looked at it, when we actually first started and sort of said, okay, what are we going to do? We actually started with, we were going to do the first 2,600 albums in order. But actually by doing so, we would have only been still in the 60s. And so that would have been sort of like, so then we started saying, well, actually maybe it was 26 weeks, 26 letters of the alphabet. It seemed blindingly obvious when it was pointed out to us that we could do the first that we could do the first 100 of each letter, and then we had to really focus on that, because it did come, for example, Billy Bragg played at the centre around the times that we could have done the Bs, and we could have interviewed Billy Bragg. He could have been the featured artist and stuff, but he wasn't in the first 100, and so we actually got told, no, we can't do that. And it's a bit, well, okay, all right. So and because I mean we've it's been a fairly tight budget, to put it bluntly, to actually be able to do this. We're creating at least 26 short films. We're filming all over the country. We've actually the logistics, finding the bands and everything else like that. It's been sort of a hard work. Then creating the website from scratch. We didn't actually know that that was going to have to happen. Getting into the house, doing all the material, and keeping then a social media person available for 6 months. It's a big sort of ask sort of throughout the period, and there's no doubt there's going to be sort of lulls during it, and we sort of have to try and each week motivate it and sort of bring it. So we're looking to the bands as well. I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, this week we've had Gallant Drunk, and actually they've been highly active on Twitter, which has been sort of great. Some of the other bands don't actually exist, so looking to in the nursery over here. So I'm sure when that's in a week and a bit's time when it's going out there, that we want you to use all your contacts and stuff. We want the business, music community. I mean, just from your perspective, I mean, has there been much of a buzz within sort of people talking about it? You hearing people talk about it? I know we've sworn them to secrecy until they're sitting here and we just announced that.
Yeah, I think there's been like an embargo, hasn't there? So we haven't been able to mention it and use it as a promotional tool. But we're sort of fully aware of it's going to happen, and we do as much as we can on Facebook.
But actually around people, are you hearing people talk about this? I mean, so there was a lot of press, obviously, at the time that it actually launched. But
I think so, yeah. I mean, there's some guy who set up a Steve and Melinda Facebook page based around Cabaret Voltaire, and he set it up, and that was, I suppose, it was just perfect timing that the Cabaret Voltaire section came out, and he was. I think he had a personal message from Stephen 2 days before, and telling him about the interview that he was interviewed. Okay. So he put that up on Facebook, and I sort of did a private message. I said, "Do you realise this is? It's not common knowledge." And it's probably
you spotted it when we didn't. I mean, I think that's it. I mean, we don't want to. I mean, it's not huge sort of secrets that we're going, but it's nice to sort of reveal some of the stuff, and which moves me nicely on, because I'm going to let you all have a break slightly. And
I wanted to ask one question.
Yeah.
Were there any artists that Sheila and the family picked for a letter that you looked, you got a blank, you couldn't find anything, or someone who said
yes.
no?
I mean, well, yes, in terms of we usually got a list of about 5.
Okay.
And with a couple of asterisks kind of thing, and so we were trying to go down. I think when we got to Bees was a really nightmare. The Bees, they wanted Babes in Toyland. Babes in Toyland don't still exist. They're all in the US. We couldn't afford to send a crew over to the US to be able to do it, and we couldn't get hold of them. They'd split up and they weren't all talking to each other. And in the meantime, we were trying to get it. And actually, one of the largest selection was Bach in the Bees. So we actually said, well, we could do it about the classical section. We get the family talking about it because that'd be nice and easy for us to do. And they didn't want to do that because they said, well, we've got nothing to say about it. So eventually, we actually managed, fortunately, through another band, got hold of one of Laurie from Babes in Toyland, and actually she had to shoot her own interview and send it to us as well, and to be able to do it. But that was a sort of there is been. And actually, it's the logistics of trying to get around the country and trying to get to people and sort of try and make sure that they all tie up at once, and then finding the right locations to be able to film it in as well. So it's been, it isn't always sort of like, oh, we've got the right ones. I mean, there is a few more coming up that we can't actually, they're not in the UK. And we didn't want it just to be UK based, but our resources don't, unfortunately, pay for us to go off around the world to actually go and film them, which would be very nice. I would like to play you one more film, if that's possible, and then if there are any questions, we'd be very happy to answer any questions. This is one that's coming out on Tuesday next week, so no one has seen it before. It's one of my favourites because they're great fun. Well, they sort of see it's a double act, sort of like doing the interview. And anyone who knows John Peel or knows some of his tastes will know H, and H is half man, half biscuit. So if we could play that, that'd be great.
There could be nobody else to choose other than half man, half biscuit. John has a lot of music. There's lots and lots of stars next to lots and lots of tracks. And I still go to their gigs, and it's just two options.
What did God give us, Neil?
God gave us life, Nigel.
Sure did.
1, 2, 3, 4,
no chance of getting a job in those days, it was Thatcher's Britain. We were happy enough just doing this sort of thing. It was just me and chap called Neil Crossley, who's still in the band now. We had this demo tape for a cheap rate price, about 30 quid, and we thought, oh, I'll be able to just let's take it around. And we took it to Factory Records actually, because we were big fans and all that kind of stuff. And they were okay with it, but we knew, obviously nothing would come of that. And eventually we took it into Jeff at Pro, not really thinking anything of it.
Well, as soon as I heard it, I loved it, basically. The first track was God Gave Us Life, which goes on God Gave Us Life. All the things was to men, so that men in big coats can take us to the woods to stop non-existent puppies. God gave us life, so now we could take things, offspring men, we call and get driven to the woods to stop non-existent puppies. I was with my wife, Annie, driving home from the drop shop, and I said to her, "Did I hear right there?" She said, "I think so."
And he also gave perfect hit. And he also gave a final prayer.
First thing I said was that it's just great, but the recording quality was pretty poor, really.
Yeah.
I might have said something strong on that.
Imagine what it
so I said, "Well, you're not going to be recording." And it's my bad. I said, "No, come on it." More or less those words.
Yeah.
Right. And I said, "Well, it's crap and all that." And he said, no, that's definitely finished with that now. It's a sort of typical attitude you have about things, really.
Did you send that to John Peel then? You did, didn't you? And then
Yeah, well, I sent John Peel, in those days, of course, it was vinyl, so you got a test presser. So I got a phone call, more or less, the next day. And he says, "Jeff," he says, "what's this? I've just played the first side of this. What is it? Tell me, it's just fantastic and all that." I said, "Well, they're called Half a Lot Biscuit." And he said, "Have they got any new material?" So I didn't hesitate. The impression I got was that they hadn't really. So I just said yes. And it just took off like mad.
Well, one of the consolations in my life is that however long I may live, Half Man, Half Biscuit will be there as well.
There was one in the gang who had scale extra, and because of that he thought he was better than you. Every day after school you go round there to play it, hoping to compete for some kind of championship, but it always took about 15 billion hours to set the track up, and even when you did, the thing never seemed to work.
I think it was the start perhaps of us being maybe not viewed solely as a novelty wacky act from Liverpool. Certain people who would have otherwise perhaps dismissed as, they're not the Grumbleweeds, not there's anything wrong with the Grumbleweeds, of course, but there's a bit more to us, and I think John realised that perhaps from the start.
Yeah.
And now he's working in a job with a future. He hands me my gyro every 2 weeks.
I feel sorry for younger bands now, in a way, that I think it must be quite difficult to get.
It's an understatement, it's quite difficult.
Yeah, well, yeah.
It's virgin on the impossible.
Yeah. Whereas, at least when we were young, you could have that possibility, even as we were saying before, of having such an amateur sounding, I suppose, could have been worse, couldn't it? But an amateur sounding, looking, appearing outfit like ourselves being played on national radio, it was both fascinating and thrilling at the same time, and possible. We were kind of not pleasantly surprised, more pleasantly shocked to hear ourselves on the radio, it was getting our heads around that. It got us to think, do we now, think about what we're doing, and do we kind of start doing different types of songs? But because of the things John would say after each song he played, we thought, no, because he's enjoying that, what we're doing at the moment, so why change it? Let's just, sort of carry on doing the same thing.
Nigel, tell us more. Give us the title of the LP again first before we go any further.
The LP will be called Voyage to the Bottom of the Road.
That's right, and it's released when?
Sometime November.
Exciting plans to promote the record?
No.
Right.
No.
Okay. I knew the answer to that before I even asked it.
I think his written word is criminally underrated, and his way with words. Just to listen to his show, the things he's talking about, and the things he's saying between songs, fantastic, very humorous. So much so, actually, I stole one of his lines for one of my songs.
It was a magical place. I half expected a nymph to appear, shyly from out of the break.
He was reviewing a programme about an advice programme or something for I don't know what even the advice was on, and then he just wrote the line, almost inevitably Claire Rayner appears. And I thought, I'll have that, you know.
That's where that come from,
yeah, so I stole that, yeah. Sorry, but, you know.
But then almost inevitably, Claire Rayner appeared.
Even now, writing stuff, playing stuff, you think to yourself, would this still have been acceptable on John's show? And as long as we think it is, or it would have been, we'll go with it.
I've said it before, a national treasure, there's no question about it. When I die, I want them to be buried with me.
Okay, that's enough of me rabbiting on. So if there are any questions, we're happy to talk about anything you like to. Any questions for anyone?
Have you got an idea of how it will work if you do get sort of further funding? Is there a roadmap in your mind for how the project would expand?
Because we have the two projects, because we want to do the documentary, there's a way that we see into the record collection as a feature documentary, using an author doc and using the right character to actually go into that and to explore it, and then what do you discover? Because actually I don't think it's unfair to say that the collection itself almost represents the history of music for 40 years, and global music, not just UK music. So that's the kind of documentary. In terms of the actual collection, I think, and what we're doing now with the space, I think probably just because after 6 months we've done 1/10 of it, and we don't want to do 90% and keep going for... I don't think anyone's going to fund us to do that anyway. So I think we've got to find a way that actually the next side of it, we can speed up sort of some of the stuff that we're doing. We wanted to sort of... I don't think we could just sort of suddenly just put everything else on there. We'd like it to keep going. We'd like it still to be on the space. And I think there's a big question to be, because I think the way that the space has been set up is that come the end of October, most of the organisations we've only been asked to clear rights until the end of October. Now, we've cleared rights throughout, so we're able to, but a lot of the other organisations may not have done so. So my fear is that that October the 31st, that's it and the site's off. And so we need to be able to then put what we've got onto another site. But one of the things is that at the moment, because we've actually been able to do it on Amazon servers with the BBC, one, it hasn't crashed, and two, we're not paying for it. So the next stage, we've got to fund it, so we've got to go out there. So if that's...
And I think the other issue about the end of October is that the deal we've got with the Arts Council's got with the arts organisations is that they can commercially exploit the material after the 31st of October if they wish to. I mean, not all of it is commercial, obviously, but in some cases it could be. So, but they've held off, so it's a non-commercial public service space until that point, and then things which would be exploited commercially will come off, and that can be done with. So whatever happens, there's a bit of a change going to happen at the end of October. But, as you say, this is something which actually there's only 10% there, even when you've got 2,600 albums available. So there's a lot more potentially that could be done. And,
well, what I should sort of say is always been, Sheila and the family have always made it very clear that their ultimate goal is that the physical collection, they would like to be with the British Library.
And now, of course, we have one of the people who created the space, Roly Keating, who's moved to become director of the British Library. So, hey, that's quite neat, isn't it?
That's quite good. So I think there's some conversations to be had about how... I mean, part of the difficulty I think the British Library had in the first place is to actually catalogue the collection was an issue for them. And by us doing this, we may have actually, if we continue doing it, provide their solution for that. So, but the way that the British Library worked, and I didn't actually realise this, but they would house it within there, but actually if any member of the public comes into the library and says, I'd like to listen to this piece of music, they can actually physically go and get the piece of music and the record and put it on for them to actually listen to, which, mind you, they've got to find it. and I think they have to find the space to actually hold their collection. But so hopefully that's there. Is there another question here?
Is it the first 100 records of a letter, or the first 100 artists? And might a way of compressing the process be just to pick 100 representative artists?
Yeah, I suppose that's the question. But when you suddenly have Fairport Convention having 22 albums in there, then we suddenly end up having to do quite a lot. So we limited it to the 100 records. But I mean, I agree that. I mean, I think probably the next stage is to go. If you made it another, not 26 weeks, but if you did it sort of like, so that here's the letter A, here's the letter B, here's the letter C, and you actually do the rest within each letter, might be a way of sort of being able to do that. And we could, as I said, if we're not creating the video content is actually the more expensive and time-consuming area for that. Because John did catalogue it, we could get through the letters and actually scan the cards. The only other thing is that when you scan the cards, we're trying to make this so that it reads the scans, so that actually OCR software is used so that you can actually have it all put into a database. So it will ultimately be searchable. So if someone wants to put in, but that still isn't 100% accurate. So someone has to physically go through and just make sure all the data's being put in properly. Trevor?
Well done, Charlie. By the way, that's very good. Just one question though, just to do with rights. It's a question about album cover artwork. Has that got an issue?
It's a
Sorry,
good question.
It's probably typical of me to ask that. But
No, it's a good question. This isn't being recorded, is it? Okay. So the truth is that the album artwork that was actually on there, the rights all remain with the rights owner. We had a conversation about what we should do with it, because the reality of trying to track and trace everyone that's there and make sure it's cleared. So what's happened is although we're photographing all the album artwork at high quality, the actual quality of the pictures that are actually being put onto the site itself is such that they couldn't be replicated. You couldn't actually use that artwork. So we've actually made and if there was ever to be a complaint made about it, then we would remove it. And we were advised, I think there were 3 albums, or 3 artists, I think, sort of anything to do with Michael Jackson, I think, or anything to do with the Beatles was a question mark, and Andy Warhol's Velvet Underground cover was an issue, and we need to look at that, because I think that does fall within Velvet Underground when we get to V. There's a question there.
I got here a bit late, so this might have been covered already. The mind boggles with this, because I think it's an absolutely amazing idea, which the whole of the UK will get behind once they know about it. But I was just wondering, in terms of radio, have you discussed any collaborations with, say, Six Music, who I see as a bit of a legacy for John?
No, it's a very good question. I mean, there was, I had this plan or idea that for every day the space was live, we would put on one of John's radio shows. And I explained that to the BBC and said, could we do that? And I think they were just horrified. So I think there was rights issues. It's owned by BBC Worldwide, it turns out. And BBC Worldwide is a commercial part of the BBC. Within the BBC themselves, and Stephen, who's been helping us, we've had sort of fantastic sort of access. They've provided us footage and stuff. The Old Grey Whistle test has been provided to us as well. We've got a number of later with Jules Holland, which is a production company, and they've been giving that free for us to be able to use as well. So we've had great that. But when it came to the radio, I have to say that I'm sad that we don't have more stuff. And there is a link up every Saturday morning at about 5 o'clock in the morning. Rob DeBank does a Peel session, which from a different letter of the alphabet. So he's actually been doing that. And actually within the radio section on the site, there's you can click on that and to listen to that, and that's being held on iPlay a little bit longer. But John's voice is kind of everything about John that people remember. So really to be able to have more of the there. And what we do say is that if you ever go to... one of the other people who's been an immense help to us and has been the person that's actually helped us find a lot of John's voice and talking is a guy called Steve Lodge, who runs the John Peel Wiki site. And if anyone wants to go to the most amazing site that's ever there in terms of collection of data, a lot of which is sort of obviously illegal and they shouldn't have it anyway, but I recommend going to it, is you can go to a calendar there of just about every year and you can click on it and you will get a radio show of John, sort of that. So if you really want to listen to John Peel, you can through John Peel Wiki.
seem to remember that was...
That was one of his shows.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, one of the radio shows that John did. I mean, that and Top Gear and stuff that was there. Are there any other questions?
There is an immense amount of material there. You know, there's so much for people to explore. I really kind of hope people do. And from the BBC point of view, I mean, yeah, Stephen James Young has been really involved as the BBC mentor, but I think, you know, all of us are really delighted to have got this up and running as kind of really one of the premier projects on the space, because John spent his life at the time at the BBC. I think it's, you know, it's only right really that did this. I was the head of department when we launched Home Truths, so had the pleasure of working with him on in that sort of phase of his career. And I think what was really kind of special was that kind of integrity. You know, that there was a man there who wasn't sort of that fussed about being a celebrity. You know, that wasn't what interested him. And there's a good piece about his philosophy on the site where he's talking about that he's much more passionate about radio. I know you made a TV programme with him.
Yeah, he hated TV.
That was always the sort of secondary thing, which I always think is a sign of somebody who's, you know, more interested in what they're doing than the fame and fortune that it brings. So, and I'm also really, really delighted that the wing of the new broadcasting house in the centre of London is going to be called the John Peel Wing, which I think is terrific. So, you know, there's all sorts of ways in which his legacy lives on, and it's just really interesting hearing you guys talk about, you know, that and Half Man, Half Biscuit, how it actually steered their career to some extent, that they were actually, you know, creating music almost that they thought he would enjoy. So
I mean, I think that too. Well, one of the things that's been the nicest thing for the family out of all of this, apart from the fact because we've had to intrude quite a lot on what they've done, is that there have been a number of times, it's been through Twitter and Facebook and other things like that, where people have expressed the fact that they never thought they'd get to discover new music through John again, and they are through this. And that's fantastic. I mean, partly they say there's obscure bands, never even heard of them and everything else, but there are quite a lot of people who've sort of said, after John died, they just didn't know what to do in terms of finding new music. So, like, who do you go to actually sort of be able to decide that's there? I think Annie Nightingale claimed that Six Music is actually John Peel. That's the only way the BBC could actually cope with it, to create a whole channel. Well, it was actually there before John died, so it wasn't created as a result of that. But I think it is a lot about Six Music. And going back to the question about the link up with the radio stations, I think we would love to do sort of more on the radio side of things, and hopefully we can and link up actually just outside to other independent record stations as well. The more people that know about this, the more people that sort of follow it, the more chance we have that this won't stop. And I think for us, that would be a failure. And so far, we've been really sort of pleased. And we couldn't have asked for more publicity about it, but it's now getting people to really come to the site and spend time on it. Dan?
This is not so much a question, more just a statement. I think that things like this are incredibly important because, especially in the past 5 years, we are so drowning in white noise of content. It's just, it's to the point where one can't manage it, and I think things like this, curated content, is going to become the heart of people's listening. And I think in this way, pieces like Peel and also Annie Nightingale, you know, the idea of the BBC starting to look at shaping curated spaces is absolutely brilliant. And if the archive does get opened up and put into the public domain, it could just be fantastic. So I hope that this will act as an example and as a real beacon to the BBC and to other broadcasters as what could be done with curated stuff, because it's just brilliant.
Thanks.
I think as an artist, for me, listening to Peel is a very personal thing, and what you've done here comes across. It's been portrayed on a personal level, so it's worked perfectly for that.
Can I just say something? Lynn Champion, I had the great pleasure of working with John for a couple of years in the 80s, because I worked at Radio 1 on Janice Long show, did all the speech before he was on. So we worked in the same office, and he's obviously just a total hero. But as he is for so many people. But I think what you were saying about integrity, his own integrity in all sorts of ways, is that's the key thing about John, I think, that needs to be, and I take your point about this as well, which has really got to be corralled, which you've done here. But it needs to be sustainable, doesn't it? Your project needs to have sustainable funding. And it doesn't. What about just starting a station, a whole radio station? This is a station, as you said, which is on listener subscriptions, like a community of interest type station, based on funding from sustainable sources, and all the different people contributing, all the bands around the world would presumably help fund it, as well as the listeners. It sounds a bit pie in the sky, but I honestly believe that kind of integrity would be. Is out there, and people would fund something like this, and it has to be radio, really, with pictures, but radio.
No, I think is one of the issues we're grappling with at the moment. I think the horrible word to monetize this sort of thing is kind of the worst thing that we want to sort of like be perceived as doing, put advertising and stuff on it. Really, what we want to do is find a way that it can be done. We don't expect to become millionaires by doing this, but it's really important that we do it right and get it right. And I think that's why it's always been important that John's family are very involved with what we're doing. And I think what you're saying is very much in our mind, is how do we take this further? If everyone who'd visited the site had the offer or said, would you contribute £1 towards this or something like this to continue, it is a sort of like thing. And we're sitting down with the John Peel Centre, with John's family, and sort of saying, okay, what is the next stage? How do we do this? What can we keep doing? And we'll be talking to the BBC and the Arts Centre, the Arts Council, and sort of saying, okay, so the more ideas that people can throw at us and keep doing it. And if it's achievable, I mean, that's the question, I think, is what would we get to be able to do so, and how do we do this frugally but still do it justice?
Kiss FM and the whole sort of the beginning of the pirate radio turning into community of interest radio stations, and there's so much potential, I think, for that, and for something like this, which has got a universal appeal all over the world. I think there's loads to be talked about there.
Thank you. Right, with the bell going. And well, I'm sorry about some of the technical problems we had, and sort of, but thank you very much for coming along. I hope you found it interesting.